Welcome to Miniatures Rundown. I'm Kevin, and today we're talking Cities of Sigmar. So soon, as of this recording, Cities of Sigmar is going to be on the shelves, and you faithful Sigmarites are going to be able to get your hands on this Battletome and get those cog forts up and running. What we're talking about today is I'm going to talk about what I feel is strong and what's fun in the new Cities of Sigmar Battletome. The army in many ways has fundamentally changed in how it's going to operate and how it's going to play. And I really think that's a good thing. I think that there is a lot of play available in this book that wasn't available to it before. And a lot of units have changed. And of course, I mean, let's not ignore the cog fort in the room. There's some really big stuff that has been added to the book that adds a lot of power and flavor to it. So let's get started. So first, the biggest changes have been to the faction rules. One of the biggest things is the form up. What it is you basically pick 3 units that are within 12 inches of each other, and they become under orders. And under orders, what that does is it gives the units access to different abilities and on their war scrolls and in the general faction rules themselves, such as take aim, which gives 1 to hit rolls for shooting for units that are under orders. For 1 unit that is under orders, which is really strong. It's basically a free all-out attack for your units that are under orders. And so that means another unit in your army could also use all-out attack in order to really put a hurt on in the shooting phase. Not to mention the Into Them You Dogs ability, which allows you to use a hero to chain activate other units in the fight phase when that hero is fighting, as long as the other units that are activating are under orders, gaining a variety of inspirited or emboldened, as you can see in the ability text. Really, my thoughts on these faction traits is that this is such a characterful and strong part of the army where it makes you want to form your army up into blocks of units that march across the battlefield and have units in reserve behind them to take the place of the ones that have fallen in order to keep that formation up, which is so characterful of the army and really plays into their lore of the Castellite formation, which is like the invention of the Cities of Sigmar and how they're able to withstand just normal humans fighting against the horrors of the mortal realms. And I think this really personifies that in some really interesting ways. Speaking of forming up, the battle formations, I know it's a terrible pun, but we're going to go with it. They have some really interesting ones that I think that are really great for, and some that, I think if you build an army into them, they could work out really well. Some of my favorites are, of course, the Masters of the Arcane, which is you add 1 to Arcane Manipulation, which is something new that's introduced in this book. And we'll talk about it when we get to some of the characters. You add 1 to Arcane Manipulation rolls for friendly wizards and that are under orders, and also to banishment rolls, which is also really huge. There are a lot of really strong manifestations out there, and getting +1 to banishment rolls and getting, in addition to if there are multiple manifestations out on the battlefield, means that you could pretty easily dispel a lot of manifestations that are out there. Another one of my favorites is the Zealous Hordes. It's really straightforward, but sometimes the simple ways are the most effective. And it simply adds +1 to wound rolls for combat attacks made by Sigmarite units that target the enemy using that fight ability. So you're an opponent, it's a reaction to your opponent fighting one of your units. They get hit, and now they fight back against that unit, and they get +1 to their wound rolls, which really exemplifies the whole shield wall, the enemy rushing in and getting repelled by the shield wall, and then getting then your unit getting the strike back. I think that's really cool. And what would a Battletome be without heroic traits? One of my favorites is, and this is just such a good one, is the Stentorian General, where you subtract 1 from ward rolls for enemy units while they're in combat with any visible friendly units that are wholly within 12 of this unit and are under orders. Once again, it plays into the whole under orders effect that you see in this army and how everything really is integral to that formation being a part of your game plan. And -1 to ward rolls is so strong. So many units, especially if we're talking about death armies, have a 6-up ward, and or even in the case of like Daughters of Cain, for instance, where there's 6-up wards all over the place, being able to strip and reduce that ward is such a strong ability. Many units rely on their wards to have strong wards, such as a 4-up ward, rely on that to just stay on the battlefield. And being able to reduce a 4 to a 5-up changes the math of their saving by a lot. And so I think that the Stentorian General is really great. On the other side of that is the Grizzled Drill Master. Well, other units have a ward 6-up while they're wholly within 12 of this unit and under orders. So kind of the reverse, where they get a ward for being wholly within 12 of the general while being under orders. Gives your units a little bit more survivability. There's not a whole lot of wards in this book, so having access to that 6-up ward will keep your units around just a little bit longer. And in many cases, I think that's all you're going to need. Some of these units, just having 1 or 2 models left around is going to be really, really strong. Of course, artifacts of power. Can't leave home without those. There is one of my favorites is the Bones of Saint Igniphus. It's once again, it kind of is, for me, is very reminiscent of old Warhammer Fantasy, where there were bones of saints and stuff that are being, held and held aloft and revered by the Empire on the battlefield and in the hands of the warrior priests. And this very much kind of reminds me of that. It adds 1 to the casting roll or chanting roll for an ability that is declared wholly within 12. It's a reaction to a casting for a prayer or a spell. So once per turn, you get to add 1 to the casting or chanting roll. And adding 1 to a chanting roll is so strong. Casting rolls also can be really great too, but specifically on a chanting roll, being able to build up those ritual points and get those stronger prayers off is really impactful in this game. And I would be remiss to not mention the Sphere Celestial, which is in your hero phase. It's a lot of text, so I'm going to go through it because that requires to understand it. If this unit is not in combat, pick a point on the battlefield more than 3 inches from all units, friendly and enemy, and terrain features to be the target point. Then pick another visible friendly Cities of Sigmar infantry or cavalry hero that is wholly within 18 of this unit and not in combat to be the target unit. Remove this unit from the battlefield and set it up again within 1 inch of the target unit and not in combat. Then remove the target unit from the battlefield and set up again within 1 inch of the target point and not in combat. This unit and the target unit can use move abilities in the following movement phase. This is an exception to the core rules. So you get to move things around in the hero phase and then still use move abilities later. Once again, that breaks all of the rules that we are so familiar with in this edition of Age of Sigmar for things teleporting, being able to manage movement like that. And this game is often won in the movement phase. Being able to manage movement in this way is really great. I feel like you're most often going to see the Sphere Celestial being taken in many competitive Cities of Sigmar armies. Now, the Cog Forts, I know they get a lot of praise. They get a lot of fanfare for their arrival, and they are really cool models. They also get their own unique enhancement, which is the Ironweld Innovations. One that I just cannot see anyone leaving home without is a prototype Arco-Combustor Uninhibitor. That's a really long name, but I guess it makes sense for the Ironweld arsenal. For once per battle in your movement phase, the rest of the turn you add 3 to its move. You can use shoot abilities even if it used a retreat in the same turn, and it doesn't take mortal damage from retreating. So it allows you to get your Cog Fort out of dodge and being able to still shoot without having to spend heat points to gain heat points in order to do that, which we'll talk about once we get to Cog Forts. It is really great. The other ones are great too, removing 1 heat token or subtracting 1 from the attack characteristic of a target's melee weapons that charge the Cog Fort. It's once per battle for the grapple net launcher. It's good. In some matchups it's going to be useful. Some matchups it won't. I think that though the Arco-Combustor Uninhibitor is probably going to be the one that you see taken most often. I really like that one. And of course, there's a spell lore and a prayer lore. Both of them are really strong, and you're going to have a priest and a wizard in your Cities of Sigmar army almost certainly. Some of the spells that stand out to me are the Curse of Scorched Metal. You pick a friendly Cities of Sigmar wizard to cast that spell, and then you pick a visible enemy unit with an 18. It's cast on a 7. Until the start of your next turn, the first time that target uses an attack ability for each unmodified hit roll of a 1. As part of that attack ability, inflict 1 mortal damage on that target after the attack ability has been resolved. So anything that is throwing out a high volume of attacks, that spell is going to really kick back and make a ton of damage in many cases. I mean, if someone's rolling, I'm thinking Daughters of Cain, who are going to be rolling, 40 plus dice when they attack. That is going to really make back some mortal wounds in a good way. One of my favorite prayers from the prayer lore is the Reckoning of Sinners, which it casts on a 5, and then on a 10 plus you can pick a second target, and you pick a visible friendly Cities of Sigmar unit wholly within 12, and then you cast the prayer. If there's an enemy unit in combat with that blessed unit, it has a maximum control score of 1, which is incredible for taking objectives away and also potentially stopping things, controlling terrain, which is important in some cases for certain battle plans or for certain battle tactics. Moving on to the units now. One of the most iconic units, of course, of Cities of Sigmar is Talia Vedra up on our Manticore. She still has a great attacks, but one of her defining things now is that she can put a unit under orders, even if it is not in the quote-unquote formation to be under orders. So what this does is it gives you a get-out-of-jail-free card if your formation gets broken and you really need that key unit to be under orders for that turn. So I think that alone really does make her worth it. She's very mobile, has a lot of wounds, sporting a 3-up save, in a 6-up ward with some very respectable attacks. I think that she's just a really great unit and a really great hero to lead your force. And of course, she is a War Master, so if you take her, she does have to be your general, which makes sense for her. And the infamous Pontifex Zenestra, who has gone through many changes over the course of this edition, being able to teleport cannons around being one of the favorite things that she was able to do previously. They've since adjusted how she's able to teleport stuff in the Scourge of Ghyran content, and her entry here is quite a bit different. Basically, Pontifex Zenestra has a passive which allows her to give murder rolls to things that die wholly within 12 of her, which you're going to be in combat pretty often with a lot of your units, and the units in this book are not incredibly durable, so you're often going to be losing models. So being able to make the enemy pay for every drop of blood that they take from you is going to be pretty valuable. She also is a Priest 2, which Priest 2 is just so strong in Age of Sigmar. There's not very many Priest 2. There's several Wizard 2s out there and a couple Wizard 3s, but Priest 2 is pretty rare. Being able to build up those ritual points to get those key prayers off when you need them is really great. Another one of the standout characters for me is the Free Guild Marshal and Relic Envoy. Once again, a very iconic unit in the Cities of Sigmar. He once again has his Relic Envoy, which once per turn army allows you to put a unit under orders, which once again gives you a great way to keep your formation working, keep your units under orders so that they can work at maximum efficiency. Most of the units in this Battletome are designed to work while they're under orders, and while they're not under orders, they are not working at their peak efficiency. So being able to maintain those orders is key to this army working as a full unit, as a full force together. As we move on through the characters, another one that really stands out to me is the Alchemite Warforger. His once per turn army ability that gives a Sigmarite unit, and you make an arcane manipulation roll, and this is where this comes in. So a lot of units now have specifically the wizard characters in this have arcane manipulation, which what it does is it's a magic-like ability, but not quite. It's not a spell. It's not a prayer. It doesn't, but it operates in a similar way. On a 3+, it gives a friendly unit crit mortals, which is, your crit mortals are always welcome. Many of your units are going to be swinging several attacks, so and it only works on the melee weapons, doesn't work on ranged weapons. So, your Fusiliers aren't going to be getting crit mortals anytime soon. But being able to give those crit mortals to units that don't have a ton of rend or don't have a whole lot of punch otherwise was really valuable. Now, of course, one of the new characters is Erasmus Zahn. He's the one that's riding the quote unquote classic Manticore, has a snake tail, goat head, and then kind of the griff head. He has some really interesting abilities. One of them is his Realm Sphere Mastery, which works in any hero phase and essentially allows you to turn an enemy manifestation into a manifestation of your own. Now, it doesn't let you take control of the enemy manifestation, so no taking control of someone else's purple sun, but you get to replace that manifestation with a manifestation from your own manifestation lore. which is really wild. I have not seen a mechanic like that in this game, and I think that's really, really interesting. And not to mention his Four Corners of the Realms is a signature spell, which allows him to teleport within 9 inches of a corner of a battlefield, which is really great for battle tactics and for even snagging objectives in many of the battle plans. One big interesting change to Cities of Sigmar is a change to the Free Guild Command Corps, which used to be a big unit of kind of a motley crew of different advisors and whatnot that went with your Free Guild Marshal. Now they've been split into 3 different units that kind of serve different purposes. There's the Adjutants, which can give a +5 tier control score, which that consists of what was once the Guardian, the full plate guy with the axe, and then the Gargolian companion. Then there is the Soul Shepherd and the Field Surgeon in the auxiliaries a portion of the Free Guild Command, which allows you to heal or prevent healing from an enemy unit on a 3+. And that is being able to prevent healing or models being returned to a unit is in many matchups can be incredibly strong. I'm once again thinking about death and the recursion that those armies typically have really can stifle an opponent's plan. And then the Whisper Blade is particularly interesting because he is one of the few only units, I believe, in the whole book that cannot form up. He cannot be under orders. He's not part of that, but he cannot be, if he's within combat range of 3 or more models that are not other Whisper Blades, then he cannot be picked to be a target of shooting attacks or combat attacks. So he can sit in the middle of your lines, thrusting about with his enchanted rapier, which isn't a bad weapon. 4 attacks, 3s and 4s, Ren 2, which is really kind of where it gets interesting with him, and damage 2 with crit mortals. So he's not doing a ton of damage, but he's really annoying, and he can sit in your lines and not be targeted by attacks, which I think is really interesting. And I think it kind of, this change to the command corps and how they operate now, I think is one more within the lore of the game. Like, they work differently, they operate differently without having to have different profiles within the same unit, which can be confusing or weird or feel off in modern Age of Sigmar. So I feel like this is kind of a welcome change. I didn't see it coming, but I like it. Now, in my opinion, one of the biggest glow ups has come to the Free Guild Steel Helms. Now, if you look at their profile, they're still pretty humble. 1 wound with a 4-up save, move 5 with, a very, very basic 2 attacks, 4s and 4s, no rend, 1 damage. But their once per turn army ability in any combat phase is what makes this unit, I think, so incredible. If they're under orders, they can just use this ability. Otherwise, they have to roll for it. You apply it to an enemy unit that they are in combat with. That enemy unit must declare that the Steel Helms as their pile-in target, and all attacks made by that unit within this unit's combat range must attack the Steel Helms. This is so incredible for tying down a big monster or stopping a massive charge from a really threatening unit. Like, I'm thinking of Chaos Chosen or Varengard or a Mega Gargant or any other large, really scary single model or small unit hammer that your opponent has. These guys can countercharge, get in, and get mixed up, declare the Steel Helm and Heart, and just ruin your opponent's chance. Now, they'll probably kill the Steel Helms, but chances are that wasn't the target that they're sending their hammer after. I really think this unit has seen an incredible glow up with just this ability. You're probably not going to take a unit of 20. You're probably just going to take a unit of 10 here and there. Once again, they fulfilled the role of being a unit that allows you to make your formation under orders. So it fulfills that for a low price. And it also gives you a kind of a tank unit that, while not super tanky in and of itself, redirecting attacks to it rather than something that's far more valuable is really, really great. Great protection for a cog port, or for something more squishy, or for any valuable unit that you want to keep alive. I think that the Steel Helms have a permanent place in many people's Cities of Sigmar rosters. Now, I'd really be missing something if I didn't talk about the cog ports. The big news for Cities of Sigmar is now we finally got our cog ports, and they are marching onto the battlefield and making a thunderous roar of it along the way. First up, the Cannonade Cogfort is probably one of the more iconic of the Cogforts. Got huge guns. It is a massive presence on the battlefield at 25 health with a 3-up save and 10 control. Most things, big monsters and whatnot, only have 5 control. Some characters have 10 control. Mega Gargants, of course, kind of break that mold. But the Cogfort being 10 control means it can hold on to objective by itself with its large base pretty easily. And not to mention its weapons. The Godbreaker Cannon being a flat damage 4 with 4s and 2s, Rend 2 at 24-inch range, along with all of its other guns, being able to give it its special ammunition, as you can probably see here. Once again, it has to be under orders to really get the most out of its abilities, and you really want the Cogfort to be under orders. So it's going to be in your opponent's best interest to try and break your formation so that your Cogfort cannot be under orders, so it can't benefit from, for instance, the adding 1 to the Rend of the Godbreaker Cannon, which is crazy strong, making it a Rend 3, which is something that's pretty rare in Age of Sigmar. Not to mention there's also Null Shot, which subtracts 1 for ward rolls for damage points inflicted by attacks made by the Godbreaker Cannon. So subtracting 1 from ward, being able to go after, a Mortark or something, a large unit that is that has a 6-up or even any kind of ward, really makes it way more vulnerable to the Godbreaker Cannon. Once again, your opponent is going to want to break your formation to make your Cogfort less effective. And I think you're going to see a ton of Cogforts out there. So knowing how to play with and against them is going to probably be key for you. The second Cogfort is kind of the more unusual one, in my opinion. It's the Conqueror Cogfort, which has the Realm Scorcher Flame Cannon, which gets a massive 66 shots. 2s and 4s. The 4s being kind of the wild card in this, because you never know what a 4+ to hit is going, or 4+ to wound is going to get you with Rend 1, Anti-Infantry 1. So its target's pretty obvious with only 1 damage. So it's not as damaging as normal as the Cannonade Cogfort. However, it gets to hold a unit. Now, I'm a Kharadron Overlords player, so I'm a little salty that Cogforts got transports while our transports got taken away from us. Of course, I mean, we have transports that work in a different way, but that they get to transport stuff. And so, but all kidding aside, it's really cool that it's in the deployment phase where this happens. They get to start aboard the Conqueror Cogfort, and then once per battle, when the Cogfort gets into combat, they can, in the charge phase, sally out of it. And if the Cogfort is in combat, and if this unit is not under orders, then this unit and the targets are under orders for the rest of the battle round. So something gets to come out of it and be under orders, which is really interesting, because normally when something is on board of it, it wouldn't be eligible to be part of the form up ability in order to gain under orders. So something gets to come out of the Conqueror, be under orders, so it can work at maximum efficiency. Both Cogforts have the ability to add heat tokens to use once per turn abilities during the hero phase. They get to accumulate as many heat tokens as they want. However, each heat token increases the chances of them taking mortal wounds, and they do slowly cool down over the course of the battle, but if you run them hot, you're going to start taking quite a few mortal wounds. And then definitely one of the more unusual of the units to come out of the new Cities of Sigmar is the Gate Gargants. They are 2 Gargants in a single unit, but they function in a kind of an interesting way, where they kind of act as an anchor for your Castellite formation as part of that 3-unit triumvirate where they get to form up, and they get to add 2 to charge rolls when they open the gates in the charge phase, which is really great for being able to just get in combat. I mean, there's just adding 2 charge rolls is not super common, and it is really great to be able to extend your threat range that far. Just that extra 2 inches can really get you past some things and into more desirable targets, especially when you consider that this can be used in any charge phase. And that means when you countercharge, you can use this to make sure that countercharge is more successful. And what's really cool about the Gate Gargants is their aggressive defender's ability, in which you get to pick up to 3 other visible friendly Sigmarite units in combat with any enemy units that are in combat with this unit to be the target. So this unit, of course, referring to the Gate Gargants. Each target can use shoot and or charge abilities, even if they use a retreat ability. So what that really, and they don't take any damage from their retreat ability. So what that means is that it's super within the lore of the Gate Gargants, where they are defending the units around them from the enemy advance. So they're keeping the enemy busy and allowing other units to retreat and still be able to shoot or charge, which I think is super characterful and really like fulfills the lore role of the Gate Gargants, but also provides a really interesting gameplay mechanic as well, allowing you to be a lot more fluid on the battlefield and keeping your opponent from being able to tie you up. And that's my overview of the Cities of Sigmar Battletome. I think that this book really has shown that Games Workshop has gotten very creative in making these Battletomes something that is quite a bit different from what it was when the battle packs first released at the start of this edition, and really exercise their creative muscles to make the armies both play very differently, but also kind of adhere to the lore in ways that are expressed on the battlefield itself, which I think is really cool. I'm a really big narrative player. I enjoy narrative play quite a bit. And I think that this, when your army plays like you feel like it should play, it just feels really good, win or lose. I think that this book is going to be a huge success. You're going to see it appear quite a bit across the battlefields of the Mortal Realms. But let me know what you think. What are you excited about for Cities of Sigmar? Are you excited to play with them? Are you excited to play against them? What are you afraid of? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, if you like this content and want to see more, don't forget to like and subscribe. And check out our Patreon down below. Every little bit helps, and we appreciate it. Thank you very much, and happy gaming. Goodbye.